Hello, everyone. Welcome this evening and a little bit earlier for our listeners who are not in East Africa or Central Europe or the UK. I'd like to introduce myself. This is, as Mark said, my first webinar. I'm Athena Trakatis, and I'm the new editor of the International Journal of Nautical Archaeology. And this is the IJNA webinar number 5. So this is my first, and it will be the only one this year. But just to remind us where we've been, there have been 4 previously, obviously. And the last one was in May of 2020. So a lot's happened since then. We've all become a little bit more technically savvy with Zoom, I hope, in the meantime, for obvious reasons. But just to remind you, that last webinar was about, it was public archaeology and community-driven research. And that was based on an article from IJNA, and it's the same we'll continue to do here. But for this transition also means that our previous editor of IJNA, Miranda Richardson, that was her last webinar, and this is my first. We'll be having 2 a year. That is the plan, at least 2 a year. And as Mark said, with a generous made generously possible by the Honor Frost Foundation. Today, I'd like to welcome and thank our speakers, Dr. Elgidius Ichumbaki of University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, and Dr. John Cooper from University of Exeter in the UK. And they'll be speaking about co-creating maritime heritage research in East Africa for inclusive growth. Our point of departure for these webinars, hopefully I can change my screen here. Our point of departure for these webinars are articles that are published in the International Journal of Nautical Archaeology. And for this particular webinar, there are 2 articles from volume 50.2, so that's, yes, the 50th year of IJNA, that are particularly significant. One, which was the main influence, was the building Nagala, a double outrigger log boat in Bagamoyo, Tanzania. And the other was a contemporary wooden watercraft in Zanzibar Channel, Tanzania. And as you can see, the cover art for the volume 50.2 is also inspired by these articles. So I'd like to thank both our speakers, and without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Dr. Elgidius Ichumbaki. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Athena, for that welcome and brief introduction. And let me share my screen so that we can all speak from the same page. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's you, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Athena, for that introduction, and thanks everybody for joining and listening to our talk. So I will speak together with John, but we are doing this on behalf of a couple of colleagues, as you might have seen, our colleague co-authors, mainly Dr. Ruth Brew of the University of Southampton, Sinyati Robinson, Philip Maligis, Thomas Biginagwa, Elinaza Mjema, and many others who are based at the University of Dar es Salaam and who were part and parcel of the research that we will be presenting today. So we were presenting the co-creation in maritime research for inclusive growth, and we will use the project of Bahari Yetu Urithi Wetu, which means our ocean, our heritage, as a case study to try to showcase why we think it is important to co-create research and try to discuss. So in this presentation, we will try to go through multiple aspects, but the first thing will be to introduce our project, which is Bahari Yetu Urithi Wetu, or our ocean, our heritage, as I said, and then characterize the maritime heritage of Bagamoyo, which is the area where the project was implemented, and the 2 articles we will be discussing are emanating from, but try to outline the heritage recording techniques that we employed, as well as the public engagements and activities that were conducted as part of the project, which are so important in terms of creating research. So these engagement activities and public activities that were done in Bagamoyo will be part and parcel of what we represent. And then we will finish up with the conclusion and questions and discussions where necessary. Just to begin with, this is the boat that we built. And so one of the articles that the Athena shared, which is building in Arawa, is part of the project. And this is the boat that we are reporting, which was constructed from the start to the end. And the project itself is a collaborative one, or was a collaborative one between my institution, which is the University of Dar es Salaam, and the University of Exeter, where John Cooper will be talking after me, is based. The University of Southampton, where Ruth Brew is based as well. And we were funded by Rising from the Depth, which is a network that received funding from the Global Challenge Research Fund, formerly based at the University of Nottingham and now at the University of Edinburgh. And the area of study which we bring forward is Bagamoyo, which is on the central coast of Tanzania. And as we see at the map, we are focusing on that small area within the central coast of the United Republic of Tanzania. So our project began, or the implementation of our project began with a workshop. And this workshop was not a workshop of we as researchers or academics, but a workshop of stakeholders who are the real people engaging in the maritime heritage on a day-to-day basis. So we brought together around 30 participants from 5 villages within the vicinity of Bagamoyo, and we had to discuss as a group what kind of maritime heritage we think it's important to record, what kind of strategies we should go in terms of recording, and the ideas that we thought these co-creators had in mind, totally different from what we had in our mind. So these groups were, I mean, the workshop began as one group where we all discussed the things that we thought were important, and then we later broke out into 5 groups, each group with a particular topic to discuss, as we will see at a later stage. But the whole idea was to get the knowledge and the ideas of people on what they consider maritime heritage, what they think is important to be protected, and how the documentation and identification of the same could be done without any. So maybe to introduce Bagamoyo as our case study, this is the 19th century historic town along the central coast of Tanzania. It is specifically habited by around 5 ethnic groups, many of which are some sort of related to one another. It's not like different, but it is the town where you find almost everybody from the United Republic of Tanzania, with around 120 tribes. You also find limited people from outside Tanzania who are there for business and for other kind of investment. The majority of the people are the locals who are coming from the United Republic of Tanzania and who are there mainly to do fishing and fish trading activities. So these people are the ones whom we worked with, and they're the people who gave us some knowledge about the maritime heritage of the town. But the town itself is very, very famous for the slave and ivory trade, which was very key in the 19th century. And there are quite a number of buildings and monuments which still signify the slavery and slave trade that happened in the 19th century. So what you see here, like the German Boma, which was the central administrative building during the 19th century before the capital shifted to Dar es Salaam, the Caravanserai, which was a significant slave trade building to host the slave trade dealers and the rest. And so these kind of buildings and monuments which are in Bagamoyo and gazetted as national monuments, they are markers of what the town looked like during the 19th century, the kind of activities that I now want to come through. So the people I mentioned and in this town, the majority are practicing what we call small-scale fishing, and they use traditional boats for the fishing activities. So majority of the boats are locally built, and they are either outrigger or Ngwanda or other boats that we will discuss at a later stage. But many of these boats are locally built, and they are being used to do fishing activities along the coast of this particular area. Because fishing is the major activity, and the boat are being built locally. So the building of new boats and repairing of the old boats is done all along the shore, where you find several activities happening there and taking place. The auctioning of the fish is another activity which happens on the shore. So on a daily basis, in the morning and in the afternoon, there is auctioning of the fish. And so people will come from Dar es Salaam and other parts of the country to buy fish and transport the same fish to other parts of the country for selling and all that. So another which is critical is the processing of the fish. So because some of the fish traders would take these fish to further regions, 100 kilometers and beyond, they are normally flying and drying these fish in Bagamoyo. So the whole idea of processing the fish on a day-to-day basis is another activity that one finds on the coast of Bagamoyo and beyond. There is a major link between the coast of Bagamoyo and Zanzibar, and mainly people from Zanzibar and people from Bagamoyo do trading activities. So what you see, these blue cooking oil containers which come in large numbers from Zanzibar and off-roaded in Bagamoyo to be used not only in Bagamoyo but across Tanzania. And then from Bagamoyo, you will find these kind of boats loading multiple building materials, including timbers, poles, and other materials that are needed in Zanzibar for construction purposes. So the connection between Bagamoyo and Zanzibar through these locally built boats is something which is there and is printed. And probably I would say the connection between Bagamoyo and Zanzibar is much bigger than what we find in Dar es Salaam to go to Zanzibar, because the majority of the food stuff that goes to Zanzibar, the majority of building materials that go to Zanzibar, they do not go through Dar es Salaam, but they go through Bagamoyo. And they're not going there through industrially made boats and ships, but it is the locally made boats that are being used for that purposes. So apart from this tourism, boat building and other maritime activities, there is tourism activity which is also very critical, and we find a good number of people visiting Bagamoyo. Of all the coast of Tanzania, it is Bagamoyo that receives a high number of international and domestic tourists. So it's receiving more than 17,000 international tourists a year, and that was before COVID. So the number dropped during COVID, but now it is being increasing again, almost going back to 15,000, 16,000 a year. So you find there are quite a number of hotels on the beach outside the fish processing area, and these hotels are receiving tourists. And so these tourists do not end in the hotel, but they also join the local people who are processing fish, who are doing coast activities, who are building boats, and it becomes part and parcel of what I would call fluidity of this coastal area. And then people do not end at these fish processing area, but they would go further, visiting the monuments and the buildings that I talked about, including the 13th century ruins of Kaole, which is 5 kilometers south of Bagamoyo area, the area which is so significant in terms of maritime heritage. Now, when you visit these buildings and the monuments I talked about, the Germany Boma, the Caravanserai, all these monuments are gazetted as things that needs to be protected by the law. And in some of the places that you will visit, like Kaole, you find there is billboards which give orders to visitors and to other people who are going to the site to be careful of this particular important heritage from that government of view that the monuments, the buildings, they need to be looked after, and nobody should do anything which is critical. So I would say from the government point of view, these are the formal recognized heritage which needs protected and which needs to be transferred to the next generation. But apart from those buildings, there are these kind of heritage which are critical, not from the heritage's sake, but from the livelihood point of view as well. Things like the boats which are locally built, the boats that are very significant in transferring these kind of building materials like poles and timbers from Bagamoyo to Zanzibar and other parts of Tanzania, the knowledge and skills that local people have when it comes to building the boats, the kind of processing the seashells that women groups utilize to earn income and also feed their family, and the other type of intangible heritage like spirituality and other spiritual practices that takes place under the baobab trees that are located very close to the shore. These are not part and parcel of what is being protected either by the government, I mean the central government, or by the local government, which is mandated in one way or another to look after heritage of a particular place. So as part of resolving that dilemma, as part of contributing to what is happening in Bagamoyo, we came up with the project, which, as I said, funded by Rising from the Depth Network, to try to at least record these important heritage, which are not visible as heritage from the government point of view. And working together with the local people, we visited the coast, just moving from one boat builder to another, one fisher to another, trying to interview them, try to ask them different questions on what they do. So on this picture, you can see these are John Cooper and the two research assistants, one of which is a PhD student, my PhD student now, and they are trying to engage each other and discuss with the local people, understand the type of heritage that they are opening in there. And then as part of the strategy, we also did record the boats by using 3D photogrammetry. This is one of the example of the boat that we created, and I think some who have read the paper, they can have seen that. We also did create a documentary. So at the beginning, I showed the project Ngarawa, the project boat that we created. So the process of building that boat from the start to the end was recorded by using, but I mean, we did film that, and therefore there is at least a summary of what was happening from the start to the end. And this film is part and parcel of the article Building in Ngarawa, published in the article, I mean, in the Journal of International Nautical Archaeology. So this is the coastline that I was talking about, and every aspect is done from a specific location. So when you talk about boat building is done on a particular location, there is transferring of material to Zanzibar on a specific location, the bigger boat on their own location. So there is a very well planned of this particular coastline when it comes to understanding and performing different activities. And with the help of local people, we also created a map which shows what kind of fishing sites are available, what type of fishes are available in there, and how do these people access these particular locations for various fishing activities. So that was part of the heritage that we recorded and tried to understand in a broader perspective. So there was some sort of real-time observation at the same time building, interviewing the people. We some point I would say became people who were disturbing people doing their job on the coast and outside the coast, like what you would see, this Allalai, the craftsman that we presented in the article, but also Juma, who is the major builder, and this grandfather who is talking to Sinyati, has been building boats for the past 40 years, and he is still doing the same in there. Did you also record the knowledge of the fishers? We did also exhibit some of the activities that we were done, and all these materials and things that were happening in Bagamoyo were part and parcel of what we recorded, and to make sure that we capture the entire landscape of this particular area. Now, this whole scenario presents the exceptional maritime heritage of Bagamoyo. Now, the question would, do we find such kind of a scenario elsewhere? Can we compare what we have in Bagamoyo and elsewhere? If yes, how? And if not, why? And if yes, what kind of strategies that we need to do to make sure that the strategy, the maritime heritage that we have somewhere does not end to the people, but goes beyond to other people who are located elsewhere, so that they can learn and understand what is that. So I will end up there and welcome in my colleagues, John Cooper, to start from there and give us experience from elsewhere and the type of strategies that we implemented to make sure that the heritage of Bagamoyo cuts across various people and various places. Welcome, John. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ichu. I'll just share my screen, so there'll just be a slight swap over, but we'll get there. You'll only see portion of the screen for a second, but don't worry about that. We'll get that right. All right, just bear with me, and all will be clear in a second, I hope. I hope that you can now see the whole screen, yeah?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. So thanks very much, Ichu, for that, for the first part. So we're moving on to, and in a way, I'm sort of starting this section with a little insight from other parts of the Indian Ocean, the Western Indian Ocean generally, and work that I've done with colleagues, including Lucy Blue, Chiara Zazzaro, Dionysius Adjus, and others in other parts of the Western Indian Ocean, as I say. And the kind of familiar story, as you can see from all of these images, be it in rather wealthy countries like the UAE, or even in extremely deprived countries like Yemen, is a situation where watercraft are wooden watercraft, and certainly sailing, are very, very much in abeyance. Most of the time that I've been in any of these countries, we spent a lot of time sort of picking over the sort of wreckage and the remains of vessels, large and small, and you get a real sense of getting the last vestiges, if you like, of a wooden boat building tradition before it absolutely disappears. And it's really true that when it disappears really, really quickly, either because people break up the timbers and break up the ships, or otherwise simply because of natural decay processes. I think this is even true. I mean, it's less the case in India, but it's still the case in India. And what I want to really do is contrast that picture with what we've just seen, hopefully across the pictures you've seen so far in Tanzania, where there are huge amounts of wooden watercraft, as you'll see from our article on the watercraft of the Zanzibar channel, a really interesting variety, large and small, covering different kinds of functions. Often using a sail. It's for anybody from kind of maritime archaeological background, which of course includes everybody in this room. If you haven't been to East Africa, you haven't been to Tanzania, it's a really exhilarating sight when you get there to see all of this activity going on. You think, what a marvelous heritage. And I guess the next question is, well, shouldn't it be preserved? Isn't this something that's worth preserving, worth keeping, worth treasuring in some way? And this, I suppose, brings us to, if you like, a sort of dilemma at the heart of our situation. I think Ichu has already pointed out very much that all of this heritage that we see, all of these activities, they are actually people's livelihoods at the moment. They're not, this isn't hobbyist activity. Things are changing. We do see changes in certain areas, some new types of boats emerging, some new types of nets and traps. And this is because people, you know, they want to increase their catch, they want to improve their living standards. We see also aspects of fish stocks depleting and coastal developments impinging on people's lives and livelihoods. So, you know, people are feeling pressures, they're feeling changes, they're seeing opportunities. It's a particular situation, but in some ways it's kind of normal in its dynamism for coastal communities. Anyway, so the question, I suppose, that presents itself is, with so much at stake for the people involved, the people actually, you know, making the boats and sailing the boats and using them, using the landscape and the environment, what is our role as heritage professionals, either academics or in the museum section or whatever it happens to be? How can we actually best serve the needs of the heritage? I mean, do we do what happened with all of those buildings and we simply run around chucking sort of preservation orders on everything? Well, that clearly isn't going to work. So how do we best serve the needs of the heritage, and above all, the people who actually practice it? As Ichu said, as he did in a project earlier than this current project, he did some research asking people what they regarded as the most important aspect of their heritage, and what people said, which was kind of really obviously very, very important, but also problematic for people who look at boats, was they said our heritage is the ocean. Well, that's huge and vast, and it's intangible, and it's very difficult to get one's head around as something with which we can interact as a piece of heritage, but that's where we are, and that's how people view it. So this is heritage, which is the active economic livelihood of very, very many people. So how do we approach it in a meaningful and beneficial way for the communities involved? And partly, of course, this was through the co-creation processes that Ichu talked about earlier on. So we needed to think about what our kind of rationales were, I suppose. And I'd say among them, the first of these is the idea of affirmation, that actually what we were doing was in some way underlining and demonstrating the importance to the people themselves of what they were doing. So a kind of a self-affirmation in terms of the people, and an affirmation from us in terms of the activities that we could possibly sort of go ahead with and get people involved with. We'll detail those in a little while. So that's a kind of an internal looking affirmation, if you like, within the community, affirming the value of the importance of boat builders within the community, of women who collect shells and make basketry, etc. You know, within the community as being important members of the community. Turning that outwards a little way, we can then think about, you know, looking to the wider world and celebrating this heritage. Again, this is about, in many ways, if you could say, was kind of morale or self-esteem, but also, you know, celebrating this to a wider community and a wider world, both directly through, as you can see on the left-hand side there, this was an exhibition that we held, so it was kind of directly within the town of Bagamoyo, speaking to the community itself, speaking to visitors. But also, in addition to that, we were also trying to use the powers of the internet and modern technologies to communicate this to a much broader and indeed possibly global forum, as in a sense we are doing that today. And one of the ways that kind of span out of this, of the Bahari Yetu Arithi Wetu project, was a University of Dar es Salaam project, in which a music video was made affirming, and we look at that at the end, affirming the and celebrating maritime life and maritime heritage, if you like. So the next thing we were sort of hoping to do in terms of our rationales was to communicate the value and the importance of maritime communities. Obviously, they are important, especially when we think about fishing. They're very, very important earners, producers of food. These are very, very rich coastal waters and very, very important to the kind of, you know, the food picture in Tanzania as a whole. And we did this through the exhibition that I'll touch upon, through media outreach. You can see an image there of Ichu and Sinyati in the TV studio, through the music video, through the documentary that we made, you know, of the building of the Ngalawa logboat, through social media, and through the kind of formal picture there. You can see everybody seated and lined up, was another activity, a kind of a workshop looking, bringing together various stakeholders from the community and from various aspects of government and industry. And of course, central to that was the idea that what we had to do was to promote community interests. And we could have used our academic sort of megaphone to be shouting about preservation and conservation of boat types or whatever it happened to be. But it was most important that what we did was promote community interests and represent and reflect their concerns, whatever they happen to be. So those were that kind of broad picture of what our rationale was, and what we were trying to kind of achieve, and what motivated us within this within the Bahari Yetu Urithi Wetu project. Now let's have a look quickly at some of the activities that we got involved in. Well, the first one at the outset was, as Ichu's already pointed out, was a co-creation workshop. He's already sort of outlined that, I think, quite well. But it was just to underline what we were trying to achieve there was direction from the community about what activities might be interesting and beneficial, and within those activities what we might want to reflect and emphasize and stress and communicate to a wider world. So possibly the kind of the largest scale thing that we did within all of this was to work towards an exhibition. Now, the exhibition took place in the Boma building that Ichu pointed out earlier, this very large building that was once the German headquarters. It's important and very prominent building within the town, currently unused, although the spaces are kind of open and accessible. And it was a kind of ideal, in many ways, crossroads in the town through which we could communicate our ideas and thoughts and the things that we'd assembled from the community. We did this with the help of the community. If you can see bottom right there, sorry, bottom left, I beg your pardon. Bottom left, you can see one of the boat builders, Allalai. That's the man, he's in the little sort of maroon cap. This is the man who built the Ngalawa, which is the focus of one of our articles in IJNA. There you can see him talking members of the community through the exhibition. First of all, the boat builders were just working on the boat builders table and showing the tools, etc. But as time went on, they spread their wings, they moved around the exhibition, and they started introducing people to various aspects of it. We had video clips already, and as you can see in the little image, you can see a screen hung up on the wall there. We projected video images. Some of them were around the building of the Ngalawa, so people could see that taking place. And other parts of it, another screen was showing the footage of a drone which had flown over the town and over the beach and the boats, and so was giving people a perspective of the town that perhaps they didn't see normally. Now, as you can see along the top, there were a very, very large number of school kids came to the exhibition. They were very engaged and asked lots of questions, both of UDSM students who were acting as guides, and also of the men and women of the community who were also acting as kind of expert guides, if you like. We were also quite sort of lucky and unexpected and surprised, because we had an unexpected visit, as you can see bottom right here, by a whole series of ministers of youth and labour from the Southern African Development Council, which is a kind of, a regional community, who happened to be in town. So suddenly we were invaded by lots of government ministers as well from, as I say, about, I can't remember, 16, 17 different countries. So that was a very sort of exciting and unexpected turn to the exhibition. So overall, a great success, a lot of buzz in the town, and a lot of things kind of cascaded from that event, I think. On a more kind of permanent basis, we also, particularly colleagues at UDSM, University of Dar es Salaam, went ahead and followed Mr. Allalai Muhammad. That's the man who we saw guiding people around in the exhibition. Followed him through his construction of an Ngalawa. Hopefully you'll have read the article, but just to point out, Mr. Allalai is he's entirely self-taught. He's really quite virtuoso. He doesn't just make Ngalawa. He makes about 1, 2, 3, or 4 different kinds of dugout boat, 3 types. And he's entirely self-taught, and he's developed his skills over time. Look out for that documentary film. It kind of follows the process from start to finish, and therefore captures and records it. I've already mentioned the music video, which I'll show you at the end, which again was about reaching new and different audiences. The performer that you can see there is Chemical. She is very, very well known in Tanzania, and is recognized in the street if you're walking around with her. So, she's a prominent figure, and therefore somebody who is very, very important in the communication of maritime heritage to a wider community. And she's currently, you can keep me right here, and I know she's in the University of St. Andrews on a kind of visiting scholarship arrangement at the moment, and I think might be working on a PhD, but an amazing person.
She's doing her PhD, yes.
Yeah, thanks, Ichu. So a really, really amazing person, and a real asset in the process of communicating, the kind of heritage messages that we want to achieve. So from the very, very cool and the very glamorous to the things that we are much more familiar with as academics, and these of course are the academic publications, 2 which Athena kindly introduced at the start, have been published in the International Journal of Nautical Archaeology. We also published an article in East African and Literary Cultural Studies about the naming of boats in Bagamoyo and the kind of choices people made when they gave their individual boats names, which is some of them are extremely funny and sometimes slightly rude, but very sort of insightful as to the choices people make and why they made them. And also we did an article for Heritage Journal, which looks at the kind of the sort of dilemmas and strategies around communicating and working around a heritage when that heritage is actually the kind of livelihood earning activity of the community as well. So that's worth looking out for too. This is kind of being recorded, so you can look at the recording and stop the video and get all the details of those if you're interested. There they are, 2 of them in IJNA, of course, as we already know. So our sort of other activity, another activity was to establish an NGO, so a non-government organization. So this is a formally constituted body within Bagamoyo called Chama Bagamoyo, which is an association of boat builders for Bagamoyo town. It's had a lot of uptake. We're very sort of grateful, particularly to, well, first of all, to the members of the committee, the boat builders who formed the founding committee and got this whole thing rolling from the boat builders' perspective, and gathered everybody around and started to build up members, etc. But also, I know that our research assistant colleagues, Sinyati Robinson and Philip Maligisu, did an awful lot of running around offices and getting things signed and everything to make this happen. And so now what the community of boat builders have is a boat building association, which has brought together first of all, it's created a forum through which boat builders can talk to each other, and they can represent their interests, for example, to the town authorities. It's allowed them to pool their resources in terms of knowledge and to some extent finance. It's enabled them also to train people, so that there is some basis for apprenticeship and passing things on from one generation to the next as a way of securing, you know, the interests of the boat building community from you know, out into the future. I'm hoping that at the end of this, you can give us a sort of a more detailed update, because I know things have been going on very, very recently. But even though this was just formally constituted right at the beginning of the pandemic, the builders have been really busy. They've built some, I say new types of boat, I don't mean they haven't invented new types of boat. They've built the kind of boats that they weren't building necessarily as individuals previously. They're building bigger boats, etc. And that's simply because they've been able to organize themselves in a more effective manner. Now, our final sort of activity, our final outreach activity, if you like, was the holding of a maritime week in the University of Dar es Salaam. Unfortunately, at this point, the COVID pandemic was in full swing, and Lucy Blue and I, who had hoped to come along and participate and sort of witness all of these amazing people doing amazing things, unfortunately we weren't able to go along. But in fact, we were surplus anyway, because it was a very, very successful week. It allowed, this is when a lot of the kind of TV communication happened. The exhibition that we'd held in Bagamoyo came also to the University of Dar es Salaam. So did members of the community. There was a formal stakeholder meeting bringing together people from fisheries, for example, and forestry and tourism, various aspects of the government, to kind of discuss the heritage needs of the community and the kind of implications of that heritage for the wider Tanzanian society and economy. Okay, so I may have mixed my slides a little bit here, just to give a little idea of the legacy in terms of Chama Bagamoyo. These are some photos that Ichu just sent through very, very recently, showing you some of the work of the community on the head of the beach at Bagamoyo. You can see construction underway there of, well, you can probably tell us, but it's quite a substantially sized boat. In fact, if we go on to the next one, I think it's going to be a mashua, which are these large craft that Ichu introduced earlier, that transport, you know, agricultural goods and construction materials, etc., back and forth between the mainland and Bagamoyo itself. So a really, I think of all the things, this is the most kind of tangible, the most significant, and I think I can speak for Ichu and myself, the most, I hope I can, the most kind of rewarding aspect of all of this, because here you can see, you know, actual boat builders getting a kind of lasting benefit arising from this project, which is really tangible, and, you know, amounts to income for individuals and families and communities, etc. And it's been wonderful to see that flourish in the way that it has. So I think that brings us pretty much to the end. The project was only short. It was a year in duration, but we hope that it has lasting impact, both in form of Chama Bagamoyo, but also more broadly, and hopefully has some kind of motivating effect for sort of all of coastal Tanzania, and maybe even beyond. We hope that this kind of discussion of maritime heritage has kind of pushed the subject into public forum for appreciation and discussion and debate. And that's about it, really. I think I should probably, on behalf of all of us in Bahari Yetu and Ichu as a fellow speaker, to say thank you very much to everybody for listening. And I think now if we hand back to our chair, then Athena, you can take us on to questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Ichu and John, for your presentations and hearing more about the context of how the papers and the context that is around those papers. I think it's very enlightening to get that. And I especially liked you talked about the ocean being the livelihood, and it's really this term that's the maritime living heritage that we see in action here, especially really well highlighted. And I'm impressed with how much was done in just 1 year, given all the challenges that we've faced globally as well in the last few years. So well done, and thank you both for your presentations. There are going to be hopefully some questions coming up in the chat, but if I can start off with a few questions. Now that I've looked at your articles and edited your articles, but I've reread them today, which was, again, very nice to go back. And especially I'm sitting here in Copenhagen in a very gray, rainy winter day. So to be taken back to the lovely coast of Tanzania with the sun shining. One of my questions was, you mentioned several times, of course, the boat builder, Allalai Muhammad. And one of the things that was interesting to me in the article was that you stressed that he stressed himself that he was self-taught as a boat builder. And I'm wondering how, if there's any kind of comparison or any kind of process that you've done to kind of compare his approach to other apprenticed or traditionally apprenticed boat builders or people who are in boat yards. Do you have any comments on that? Ichu or John?
Yeah, thank you, Stena, for that question. Just Alarai is exceptional, and is exceptional for that specific type of a boat, the Ngalawa, and not the same as the other, like the other boats that we present in the other article. So because of that exceptional, I don't think he is comparable to any person doing the Ngarawa building on the coast of Bagamoyo, except those few whom he has taught himself so far. He's building a generation of boat builders, Ngarawa builders in that case, and himself being a member of this association we established. They are going beyond these major boats to the smaller boats that we talked about. The few people that we have encountered in Bagamoyo who are building in Ngalawa, they were not originating from Bagamoyo. They're either from the north or from Zanzibar, where they learned about this particular the Ngalawa kind of building. So I would say Alarai is an asset by himself, a very unique kind of engineer in that particular boat, and that's why I think we continue to celebrate him, so to say. John?
Yeah, he's just an incredible character, and I think, I mean, it's not just the, I mean, he started off by building in a sense the simplest of the boats, the Mtumbwi, which is I mean, I say simple, I couldn't do one, but you know, it's you know, it's of them all. It's obviously the one that he started on, and then he moved on to the Ngalawa. And then he moved on to this kind of amazing boat, which looks exactly like our stereotypical notion of what a plank build boat. You know, it's transom sterned and kind of pointy at the front and sort of roughly dinghy shaped, but it's all carved. And he makes it from different parts of the vessel and kind of shunts different parts of it, shunts it together. So it's not, I mean, I think what's remarkable about him is not just that he learned one thing, but he self-taught himself one thing, but then he moved on and went across the whole gamut of these different carved boats. He never builds plank boats, I think Ichu was pointing out, and it's all contained within that. So he's built up this whole body of skill. I mean, a really, really broad and diverse body of skill, without any training, without any formal training. And of course, I think as maritime archaeologists or ethnographers, we always think about the idea of the apprenticeship train, and we talk about the social transmission of knowledge and all of these things. And this young lad from the, you know, went down to the beach after school and sat down and watched people and sneaked off into the woods to build his first boat so that he was happy that it would be good before anybody saw it. you know. So there's a lot of food for thought in there, you know, as approach to how people innovate and copy and transfer knowledge. Amazing, really.
Yeah, thanks, John. There are a couple of questions on the chat Q&A. So Athena, if you allow me, I will try to answer some.
Sure. Would you like me to pick one, or would you like to go ahead yourself? And is there one that's...
Yeah, I can just go ahead very quickly. Donald is asking if there is any movement on the part of the government or local authorities to support this initiative. The answer would say yes, because before we formulate the association, there wasn't any kind of connections between the boat building people and the local authority. But the formulation of this association was done collaboratively with the local authority in Bagamoyo, particularly the fishing department in the district of Bagamoyo. So they facilitated the process so far. They were happy to see that. And they have gone further to locate close to 300-meter coastline, specifically for the boat building association. So a huge amount of boats are being built from the location that has been given to the association by the local authority in the particular area. And the local authority is very happy because these people are not only building boats, but they are very much influential in monitoring the coast, in making sure that there is no any person disturbing the coastline. They are having the coast cleaning campaign and some other kind of things, which to the side of the government is quite extremely encouraging and extremely happy. And then Bob is asking, what was the first step towards that? How did the team of academics outside achieve trust and cooperation in the first instance? This is a long story. Maybe to make it quite clear is that this project did build on several activities that myself and colleagues at the University of Dar es Salaam has been doing for years. So I'd say I started engaging with the community when I was doing my PhD in 2013, 2014. And so we have done so many things together to the extent that we have built the trust. It is beyond, I would say, academic research. We have built a collaboration which is so engaging. So the local people who are living on the coast, they trust us, and we have also trusted them. But in several other activities, like the exhibition John mentioned about, we are not doing it ourselves, but they're becoming part of the exhibition team, not necessarily in Bagamoyo, in Dar es Salaam, and somewhere else. It's a real co-creation and co-production activity that we are implementing. Anna is asking how the state of the transmission of this knowledge to the next generation. This is extremely good question. On the main objectives of the association were formulated. One of the key issues is transmit knowledge from the current boat builders to the next generation. So we have a lot of young people who have interest in this particular boat building, joining the association, spending much time learning on how to build this particular boat. The same applies to fishing and the rest of the thing. But the exhibition that John showed, you must have seen pictures of multiple school kids that we invited into it and gave them some tasks to draw different activities, to write down what they think is important to visit the beach. And that was part of cultivating the interest of the young people, of the school children, so that they become interested into this particular coastal heritage and coastal archaeology, so to say. So the interaction between our team and the school children and the teachers have really raised awareness of the people, and it has cultivated interest of the others who are joining the association to build the boat. I must make it clear that people who are joining this association are not from Bagamoyo only, but they come as long as Zanzibar, they come as far as the north and the south. Is because this association has become very popular. some of the major fishers who would commission boat building from Mombasa and Mozambique, but based in Tanzania, they're now doing it in Bagamoyo, and therefore they are sending the knowledge and sending the information about this association to other people from across the country who are interested to building this particular boat. Maybe I should leave the next question to John. The other one, which is asking about the wood source. I could answer that, but John, go ahead.
Oh, I'm trying to remember now. It's you. So you've got the difference between. I mean, basically you've got it's all obviously more or less local, in the sense that it's all Tanzania. We're not talking a situation like in Arabia where they're importing it from far away. You get local varieties of forest timber, which are produced on a commercial basis, and they contribute the planks. But often the framing timbers are kind of more locally sourced from varieties of wood such as neem, etc. And so there's a kind of a different sort of collection process. There are restrictions on the types of wood that are available nowadays. So, you know, in the past, I mean, if you talk to builders, they'll say, well, our favorite wood on this might be this, but actually it's very, very difficult to use, and therefore we don't use it anymore, and so we use this one instead. So people do experience restrictions. There's not always timber sort of easily to hand. We came across one build where which was quite interesting from a technical perspective, where people couldn't get the framing timbers locally, and so they just kept building with the planks until they got them and put them in when they got them. So people are very, very, very flexible. But it is, I think it's quite rigorously regulated these days. So even when the whole process that we report in the article about the building of the Ngalawa and the cutting of the mango tree and the collection of the cashew wood, it all involved kind of permits and negotiations and even checkpoints on the road to, you know, knowing where this timber came from. So yes, the wood's local, but it is quite highly regulated.
Yeah, thanks. There are another couple of questions that I would go on responding if we still have time, Athena.
Yes, we do. We have a half an hour more.
Yeah, thanks very much. So there is our collaborator here, Ruth Brew, asking if the government is more engaged after the policy meeting. So to say, I can say, Ruth, there is much interest in taking this forward. And 2 weeks ago, we had meeting with the other government officials, and one of the things we are discussing now is how can this knowledge related to boat building on the coast can be documented and probably presented to UNESCO as part of the intangible heritage issues. So I see that the policy meeting was useful, and there should be more activities taking place as far as that area is concerned. Thanks, Darina, for the comment. Very much appreciate. And then Justin is asking intellectual property rights. That's really fantastic. I would say so far we haven't done anything as far as this intellectual property is concerned. But I think it is a good idea. We should probably think of that and see how these people's knowledge and that could be documented and create that important IPR for them. We can probably discuss this at some point. Probably if you can send me your email, then we could be able to negotiate and see how we can take that forward. John Henderson is asking amount of people who have benefited and so forth. Yes, we have quite huge number. So when we started the association, we had around 17 people, but now we have close to 40 members in the association who have just joined, because it's becoming an organization which is trustful they are getting the project, like the two projects that we are now having. It's one boat, you need $35,000 to commission that particular boat. And previously, when one would monitor the work done, currently it's the association which is doing that particular work. So I would say they are raising good income, and we are monitoring that income. We have the board, and we are doing meetings on a monthly basis to discuss where we want to move forward, what should be done, and how it works. So I should probably make it clear that the sustainability of this association and others in the region is because I am personally and my colleagues in Tanzania and have built a long-lasting relationship such that the monitoring and negotiations and discussion and guiding continues to take place. So I assume if I were based somewhere away in another institution where I wouldn't engage with this association on a weekly, monthly basis, probably it wouldn't have gone as much as it is at the moment. But sincerely, there is very much progress, and I see sustainability in it, and the trust that the association is building with the government, the trust between it and the big fishers who are commissioning such kind of highly costing boats is something that is encouraging. I think we need it. Amina, I think, is also asking if there are some ways builders had the traditional ways of protecting the Ngalawa from effects of ocean water and related to what is being used now, paints and other. Yeah, that's part of the intangible heritage that we recorded. So there are quite a lot of materials. Some of the fish, they process some of the oils of the fish just to paint the Ngalawa and the other boat to make them sustainable. But there are quite a lot of other activities which they do apart from oiling the Ngalawa using those kind of libation. There are other traditional ways, intangible kind of practice that they do as part of protecting the boat, which we can discuss further. John, do you want to look at the other questions maybe and see if there is anything you can answer? I am dominating the discussion, sorry.
That's all right. I mean, on the question of comparative studies on technologies between other parts of East Africa, there's been work done on many different parts of East Africa to various degrees and various levels of intensity. The only kind of comparative studies I can think of are really quite old, the sort of James Hornell, very, very technological comparisons of outriggers in one place compared to another. But more recently, I'm not really aware of anything at all, to be perfectly honest. And I think it would be there's a lot of documentation to be done along coastal East Africa, simply using the kind of the technologies that are available to us nowadays. But I think also inland in the kind of lakes and rivers. I mean, let's not forget that aspect of Tanzania and other parts of it's not just the sea. There are traditional boat building activities and relationships with water bodies all over the country. All around the Great Lakes areas, the rivers, etc. If I could just take the opportunity to say, Ichu's absolutely right. I mean, this was a 1-year project, and it was a great project, and I feel really, really fortunate and lucky to have been involved in it and to have this opportunity to collaborate with Ichu and everybody at University of Dar es Salaam. But it wasn't something that just began in a void. Ichu and UDSM have been working there for many, many years. And therefore, this project kind of landed in a very, very established series of relationships, and that's really what made it happen. And as Ichu said, if we'd all just jumped on planes and gone back to the UK at the end of the project, none of the ongoing legacy that he's talked about, Chama Boma and its successors, really none of that would have happened. And I mean, it should go without saying, but I don't think it does go without saying that a lot of the kind of energies that have come out of this project have just come through the ongoing works of Ichu and his colleagues at UDSM. As I say, they just wouldn't have happened, you know, if we'd all shut up shop after a year and gone off and done other things.
Thanks, John. Kennedy is asking if there are some comparison of what is happening on the coast of Bagamoyo with what is happening on the coast of Kenya and Mozambique. I think many of the boats we showcased, they are also popular on the coast of Kenya and on partly in Mozambique and Zanzibar as well. There hasn't been, as far as I'm aware, a study that could compare, but in the article we are citing some of the scenarios to compare. And I know Caesar Bita on the coast of Kenya is also doing a fantastic work, also supported by Rising from the depth. So there is a lot that we could share and understand much more about the type of boats and the building techniques that are happening on the coast. Then Morgan is asking scuba diving. Actually, 2 weeks ago, we had an evaluation meeting with the association, in one of the agenda, because we just received the permanent registration. We had like 2-year registration, so that the government was evaluating what the association is doing and whether they deserve permanent registration or not. So 2 years ago, we were given some advice on what a few things to achieve, and then be permanently registered as an entity that is legally performing boat building and teaching in Bagamoyo. So one of the issues that we discussed is how do we move forward to make sure that we expand, or the association expand the activities apart from boat building and all that. So tourism is one of the agenda on top. And one of the suggestions was like, we probably need to begin scuba diving activities. So I would say currently there are no scuba diving in Bagamoyo. There was one of the hotel which was doing it some 4 years ago, but it is stopped at some point because of COVID, and it has not been rejuvenated. And as opposed to Zanzibar, where you have a lot of scuba diving activities and boats specifically built for guiding tourists on the shore, there isn't in Bagamoyo, and it is part of the initiative that the association look into it. Yeah.
We have one more question about the, this is a nice, I think, rounding off question about what are the next steps and your future phases or future plans for the project.
Anyone go first?
So that's me going first, is it? So the formal project itself has come to an end. It was a kind of a 1-year project as part of the this great Rising from the Depths initiative, and that has come to an end. But I don't know about any future in terms of, you know, we haven't cooked anything up yet. We'll be, I mean, it's great to see that it certainly does have a future in terms of everything that Ichu's described with respect to Chama Bagamoyo. But we'll have to kind of, I think we're still probably reflecting on where we would go next with the whole initiative.
I think there is a great potential to do more activities, and so probably we should use this opportunity and saying we are just open to any collaborations that is interested, and we should be happy to move things much more forward, engage more people, and explore more activities that is there. And I think Johnny Henderson is here. The project that he was leading has made tremendous impact, not only to Tanzania, but we see the same testimonies in Mozambique and Kenya as well, where people are doing a great job. So it should probably be the desire of which of us to think of a similar project building on what John Henderson has done and what the other collaborators from the region has done to make sure that we are not only starting something and end up there, but build up on what we have started and push up the agenda. So if there is any opportunity, if there is any possibility that we need to do, we should be very happy to collaborate and welcome everybody to support. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. I don't think there's any more questions, or if anyone would like at this point in time to take a chance for questions. But if you don't think of anything here, you can also contact the authors directly. If you go to the IJNA page, you can see their contact information on both those articles and reach out to them directly. This video will be recorded. It is being recorded. It will be made available on YouTube for people to watch and to share, hopefully. I know, like we said, time zones are an issue. So we appreciate our colleagues on the East Coast of Africa being with us so late and sharing their wonderful progress that they've made and really interesting topics. And I thank you both also for sharing with us an IJNA for a wider readership. And we hope that from whatever future projects might come out of the region and from this initiative, that you will also think of publishing it again or sharing it with readers of IJNA. So I think for our first initial, my first initial webinar with IJNA, I'd really like to thank you both, Ichu and John, for giving a really interesting presentation and perspectives that I think we don't often see sometimes in the wider cultural heritage framework. So I really appreciate you taking the time. Any final words from any of our speakers or from Mark before we end for today?
Just a thank you to everybody for coming along, really. Thank you.
Great. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Then thank you to Athena, thank you to John, and of course to Ichu and to everyone for attending today's events. We will, as Athena said, post a recording of the webinar up on the NAS YouTube channel in due course, where you'll also be able to find the recordings of all the other IJNA webinars there have been to date. So on behalf of the IJNA, the NAS and our sponsors at the Honor Frost Foundation, thank you for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.